What's up, Tailgaters? You're in the booth with Tailgate Nate today. The road to predict all 136 FBS level college football teams this summer now takes us into Fort Worth, Texas. We're back in the Big 12 space, back in the great state of Texas. We are going to be talking about the TCU Horned Frogs here in this video. My name is Nate Pope, otherwise known as Tailgate Nate, and I want to thank you all so much for clicking on this video and for helping to support the channel. If you'd like to support the channel even further, then please do what it says right below me. Hit that subscribe button, and while you're at it, you might as well ring the bell, because turning on notifications will ensure that you don't miss an upload, especially not one during prediction season, and especially not one for your favorite team. I am now a sports media professional, delving in to the professional industry in sports media. Just started my new job, and if you want to see all the cool stuff I get to do while still being up to date what goes on this very YouTube channel, please give me a follow at TailgateNate29 on Twitter or X, whatever your preference to call the platform, and Instagram. You can even email me at tailgatenate29@gmail.com. Thank you all so much for supporting and interacting with me or the channel, however you may be doing so, in whatever fashion you interact with all my various content. With all that said and done and out of the way, ladies and gentlemen, let us talk about the TCU Horned Frogs here in 2025, led once again by Sonny Dykes. After leading this team to a national championship in 2022, it's not been a program that has since reached that level yet. However, this season, I think TCU is one of the sneaky dark horses in the Big 12 this season, if you can even call anyone in the Big 12 a dark horse. This is the most wide open conference in the country. Guys, TCU very, very well poised for a Big 12 title run. It wouldn't surprise me if they got there at all. You'll find out why I think that here in just a second. But how do we do preview predictions here on the channel? Well, we are first going to go through a roster overview. There you go, roster overview, which the offense is going to be right over here to the left, and the defense is going to be over here to the right at the end of the video. We are all going to go through the TCU football schedule. I'm going to give it a game-by-game preview and prediction, and this video overall is going to tell all you fine people what I think about the TCU Horned Frogs here in 2025. But before we do get started with all that, some numbers I want to make you aware of right down below me. Returning production numbers are, according to ESPN, they do factor in transfer portal additions up to a certain percentage, just to keep that in mind. And then right below that, for the classes of 2025 in both the recruiting and transfer portal senses, those ranks are right down below, both according to 24/7 Sports. With all that said and done and out of the way, let's move over. Sorry, I hit my microphone. Sorry if you heard that. That was probably loud. Let's move over to Kendall Briles' offense for the TCU Horned Frogs in 2025. And there is a returning weapon at the quarterback position, and he is a weapon because he is very dynamic. Josh Hoover was nearly a 4,000-yard passer last season. To be more specific, 3,949 yards on around 66.5% completion percentage with 25 touchdowns and 11 interceptions. Not a terrible touchdown to interception ratio, but Hoover is a gunslinger. There are times where he forces the ball into some situations where you probably would not want to force the football. If he can improve on that, look, guys, he just exploded last season. Not a guy that's going to get outside of the pocket and run, even though he had 4 rushing touchdowns last year. Barely had multiple runs over 10 yards from last season. In fact, I think his long, says it right here, is 12. I mean, the run game overall was not explosive. We'll talk about that here in just a little bit. But Josh Hoover, watch him improve here in 2025. Make no mistake, Josh Hoover, very, very good talent. He exploded last season. Guys, it really would not surprise me to see him reach that 4,000-yard mark this season. He especially will do so if he improves that touchdown to interception ratio, because this is still a TCU offense where the ball is going to be in his hands more often than not. Apologies for the awkward pause. I have to go take care of something. But let's get back to talking about TCU football in the running back room. Lead rusher Cam Cook is going to be transferring out of the program. Where did he go? He went to Jacksonville State. Again, this was not a running game that was really that explosive last season. Their most explosive guys out of the run game last year were true wide receivers. That tells you there's a lot of improvement for this run game this year. They had 400 carries as a collective unit, wide receivers, quarterbacks, everybody, and rushed for 1,481 yards as a group. Pretty good total, but 3 3.7 yards per carry. They did overall have 26 rushing touchdowns. It just was not a dynamic group, a group that's going to more so grind things out. In fact, no true running back last season had a run over 35 yards. And that is a problem area. That's an area that I think TCU is going to want to fix. So you are going to get Trent Battle back as your number one back this season. He did have 186 yards and 2 touchdowns from last season while averaging 4.2 yards per carry. Jeremy Payne, not a bad option either. He was your third leading rusher last season. So yes, it says Trent Battle there on screen. Again, that number one position according to ourlads.com. Payne is going to get some pretty good carries in there as well. And then Kavorian Barnes, he's a guy coming over from UTSA that I think can provide a really big lift to this running back room. According to ourlads.com, is that third string. I think he's going to get a pretty substantial amount of carries this season. Got 78 of them last year, only 221 yards. Go back to what he did in 2023, nearly 5 yards per carry and 715 yards and 6 touchdowns of productions for the Roadrunners just a couple of seasons ago. So overall, I do think that this is a running back room that, while they maybe didn't improve talent-wise a whole lot, although I do think Kavorian Barnes is a really good transfer, I do think this is a run game that is going to see their improvements here in 2025, but it is going to be an offense that is run through the pass. It's because of who you have at quarterback and because of a lot of the weapons that you do have in this wide receiver room. However, 3 of your top 4 wideouts from last season are gone and off to the NFL. That is your lead target and Jack Beck. Just an incredible story surrounding his family. Wish him the best, as now I believe he is with Las Vegas. Yes, he is. 1,034 yards and 9 touchdowns last season. You're also going to be losing J.P. Richardson, third leading receivers, off to the Chicago Bears. And then Savion Williams is off to a division rival of the Bears in the Green Bay Packers. All of those guys I just mentioned, at least 600 yards of production. Williams had 6 touchdowns, Richardson had 2, and then again, Beck, as I mentioned earlier, did have 9. So you're going to be losing 3 really key weapons in this wide receiver room. Again, your one guy that does return, though, second leading receiver Eric McAllister, is going to be coming back. 762 yards and 5 tutties for him last season. 2 great transfers are going to be surrounding him. The less notable one is Joseph Manjack. He had 351 yards and 3 touchdowns with Houston last year, and then in 2023, 577 yards and 6 touchdowns for Joseph Manjack. He can be a pretty high upside weapon, but the guy that they're bringing in Jordan Dwyer, is a bona fide stud. He was one of the best receivers in the FCS ranks last season. 1,192 yards and 12 touchdowns and 78 catches with the Idaho Vandals, who are one of the best teams in the FCS ranks last season. And Jordan Dwyer was a big reason why. I think he's going to come over here and be a bona fide stud and probably the best overall weapon that TCU has got in this wide receiver room. Your lead tight end Drake Dabney is also gone and off to the Titans, so that is another really big piece. That was your 5th leading receiver last season, even though not over 200 yards. Still a big important piece. DJ Rogers is going to return, with Kamorian Pimpton as a transfer that will come in here to this room. Pimpton is coming over from LSU, where he did have 6 catches, 79 yards last season. Can provide some good value at the tight end position for TCU this upcoming season. Offensive line we'll go through really quickly here. 3 starters are leaving, but there's still plenty of experience with a couple of young, talented pieces, and most notably Ryan Hughes at the left tackle position. Probably going to end up being the starter as an underclassman, as a redshirt freshman, but for the most part, upperclassman experience will lead this TCU offensive line. Bam, there's your TCU offense, again led by Kendall Briers. Josh Hoover, man, he is the key for this offense. I think he's got a ton of great weapons around him. I think the run game is only going to improve this year. If Josh Hoover cuts back on the interception numbers, his touchdown numbers will increase, and I think a 4,000 yard season is well in the cards for Hoover and the Horned Frogs this season. Andy Avalos is your defensive coordinator, as now we talk on over with the TCU Horned Frog defensive side. Run defense. That was the big problem for TCU last season, and as well as just fortifying the front line. You did lose a lot of transfers from the defensive line unit, most notably in Dominic Williams a couple of cycles ago, and you couldn't really fortify the front line as well as you wanted to last season. I think that should be and is going to be a focus for Andy Avalos, Sonny Dykes, and the TCU defense this upcoming season. I think this is a team that is a great defensive jump away from really being one of the top contenders in this conference if they're not there already. But your leader off the defensive backfield from last season, and Nana Osafo-Mensah, is going to be gone. Really, really talented piece. 38 tackles and 3 sacks last season, was the leading tackler among defensive linemen last year. However, you still do have some solid returners and some transfers like Ansel Denemba, apologies for mispronunciations. I'll do my best with that. They're going to give some pretty darn good depth here. So again, some pretty good returners. You are going to get at the stud position. Devin Deal is going to be coming back here. Sorry, I lost my place for a second. Devin Deal will be back. And then as far as true defensive linemen, Zachary Chapman, Marcus Deal, those two guys are going to be coming back. And to add in with transfers like Din Emba, you are going to be getting Perry Cole, who's coming over from a community college ranks. You also are getting Kelton Mickle, another JUCO community college transfer entering here. So you're going to hope that TCU can bulk up and fortify that defensive front. I think some guys are going to have some pretty darn good seasons for you. I don't think the overall raw talent is there like it has been in some of the past iterations of this TCU defensive front. However, I still think there are a lot of really good pieces there. And when you move on into the linebacking unit, you are going to be losing another really big piece when your lead tackler in Johnny Hodges is going to be gone. 89 tackles and a sack for him last season. One of the big pieces, one of the leaders on the defensive side. He will be a big loss out of the linebacking unit. However, Caleb Elarms-Orr is going to be coming back, as well as Nnamdi Obiazor. They are going to make for a pretty stellar duo in this linebacking unit. And we'll read off their stats from last season. Obiazor, 81 tackles, 2.5 sacks, did have a pick last season as well. And as far as Elarms-Orr goes, 54 tackles, 2 sacks, and some really good production overall. Did recover a fumble. There you go. That's the other stat I was looking for last season for this Horned Frog defensive unit. The play, I think, is going to overall need to improve from this linebacking unit, but with Elarms-Orr and Obiazor, I do think that that duo will be pretty darn stellar. Your secondary is going to be your most experienced unit this season because especially of one player that is still there. While you do have some losses here and there throughout the secondary, Bud Clark, who I think is one of the lone remaining pieces from that national championship team in 2022, is coming back. He will be one of, if not your most important defensive back this upcoming season, and he was one of them last year. 68 tackles and 3 interceptions for TCU last year. That's a really big return in that safety room. Jamal Johnson and Canada Channing are also going to be in that room. You also do get Elijah Jackson, who is a redshirt senior transfer coming over from Washington, where he had 61 tackles there in 2023 with the Washington Huskies. So you're going to get a really experienced, really, really good group in this defensive backfield. It knows what it's doing. The pass defense can have some room for improvement, but overall, man, going to be one of your better defensive units individually here in 2025. Special teams room does not see any major changes. Lead place kicker, lead punter, both are going to be coming back for another season in the purple jersey. So overall, when you talk about TCU on the defensive side of things, again, that front line, the sort of pass rush ability of TCU, I think has got to take it to the next level this season. Again, I think this is the team that's a couple defensive adjustments away from being one of the top contenders. And that's not promising anything, but I think, again, this offense is going to be well off and good. If the defense can take some steps forward and improve their play in some ways, dramatic fashion from last season, I think TCU is going to be a real good contender in the Big 12 if they're not already. Let's take a look at the Horned Frog schedule. All right, let's see how much magic the Hypnotoad can work this season, because here is the 2025 football schedule for the TCU Horned Frogs. But before we dive on into this mess, let's dive on into this one right down below here. These odds and numbers are courtesy of FanDuel. No, not telling you to go place your money. Just a nice visual aid and some context for how good the odds makers in Vegas think TCU is going to be this upcoming season. And, well, it seems like everybody has some pretty short odds to win the Big 12 Conference this season. Again, it is the most wide open conference in college football. TCU, as of this moment, as we're recording this video, plus 850 odds, which is sixth on that list. In fact, TCU's been hovering right around the 5 to 7 range with these odds, but they've consistently been behind teams like Baylor, Arizona State, Texas Tech, Utah, and the likes of Kansas State. Haven't been a repeat champ, I should say there hasn't been a repeat champ in the Big 12 in quite some time. Can TCU keep that streak going? I think this is the team very well capable of doing so, and you do get your first contest on the road against the North Carolina team, which I do think that you should beat. But North Carolina is an interesting case study. They are getting one of the best head coaches to ever do it at the professional realm in Bill Belichick. And no matter what you think about him and Tom Brady, and if it was really him or whatever the people say out there, the fact of the matter is, look at his resume. He's a very, very successful head coach that I think can translate a couple of things really well over to this college game, especially in trying to improve this North Carolina defense. But it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen with a Thanos snap of my finger. The North Carolina defense is going to take some time to get better, and it's what's going to hurt them in this game against TCU. I don't think they're going to be able to defend a dynamic passing attack like TCU is going to have yet again this season, and that's the reason why I think TCU will get that first win on the road. I believe that could be Labor Day there as well. I believe so. If not, it's next month. No, that's got to be Labor Day. I'm going to check my calendar. I've said this in videos before, but there's a thing called instincts, and sometimes I got to listen to them. Yes, they will get the win on Labor Day, and then they should be able to get the win against Abilene Christian after a really early bye week for this team. Again, really, really early bye week, but they are going to get the win over Abilene Christian. And then comes the SMU Mustangs, and I got to tell you what, I don't think this game is really being talked about just because of some of the other big-time non-conference games that are happening around the country this season. Clemson, LSU, Ohio State, Texas, so on and so forth. This is a game that, especially when September 20th comes around, guys, I'm going to have my eyes glued to the TV for this one because I think it's going to be a stellar contest. TCU, a team that I think is really well equipped to do battle with a lot of the top contenders in the Big 12 and even possibly around the country as well, with the select few, and an SMU team that made the college football playoff last year. Whew, guys, this really is a game that I would have my eye on, and SMU's got a lot coming back. Kevin Jennings, the quarterback that came onto the scene for SMU last year, took the reins of this unit, led them to a college football playoff appearance. He's coming back, as well as some really good pieces surrounding him. Defensively, you got a lot of experience and some really darn good defensive front transfers that, if they're going to be able to create havoc in the backfield, get sack Josh Hoover, pummel this offensive front, I think it's going to be a really tough game for TCU. But again, much like North Carolina, SMU, while the defense overall was solid, the run defense being able to force turnovers, that could help them here in this game against TCU. It is the pass defense that was the weak link for the Ponies last season. And I think it could be so again this season, even though their defensive backfield is going to have a ton of experience and should improve. I don't know that it's going to improve enough to get through Josh Hoover and what this TCU pass game is going to be able to do to opponents this season. On top of the fact that the TCU defense, I think, takes a nice step forward. They'll be able to not entirely stop, but I think they're going to be able to slow down Kevin Jennings and company enough to be able to get this win. It's also a home game here for TCU, and that's why I got the Horned Frogs winning the rivalry game in the battle for the Iron Skillet. They beat the SMU Mustangs. However, then the real challenges start. Your first game in conference play. Well, I'm out to just confuse people, I guess. The Arizona State game is on a Friday. Had the date right, didn't have the day right. There you go. Friday, September 26th, not Saturday, on the road against the Arizona State Sun Devils. Short week. You're coming off what's probably going to end up being a pretty emotional, if not really close game against the SMU Mustangs. And then you got to go on the road to play what I believe to be the best team in the Big 12. They showed it last year, winning the Big 12 championship game, and you got everybody coming back to that team this season. Sam Levitt could be one of the best quarterbacks in the country this year. Jordan Tyson going to be one of the best wide receivers in the country this year. And the Arizona State defense returns a ton of pieces that made them very successful. Pass rush should get better. Turnover production still going to be there. It's an Arizona State team, guys, that I just simply like a whole ton. They are still my personal favorites to go win the Big 12 conference, and I think they get the better of TCU here in this game. However, I don't think Colorado does the same. gain. Colorado's a team that's losing Shedeur Sanders, that's losing Travis Hunter. And while they still have some good pieces in the quarterback room, such as Julian Lewis, the freshman that is coming in, as well as Caden Salter, the Liberty transfer, to fill in the shoes of Shedeur Sanders at the quarterback position. They're not going to be able to fill the role of Travis Hunter. A lot of the other receivers they lost, a lot of the really solid defensive pieces they lost there as well, and I still think the line of scrimmage could be a big struggle for Colorado this season. TCU, I think, can control that in this game. I don't think TCU has that dynamic playmaker like Travis Hunter that can guard Jordan Dwyer, and TCU will win that game at home against the Buffaloes. However, they will lose on the road against the Kansas State Wildcats. Avery Johnson, I think, going to take that next step this season. He's got a lot of really important, really important, but really big transfers surrounding him in the wide receiver room as well. Jaron Tibbs, Jaron Bradley, Caleb Medford, all of them really talented pieces to pair with a returner in Jace Brown. Run game should still be solid, led by Dylan Edwards. You do have Joe Jackson. Gabe Irvin is a Nebraska transfer. You got some really stout defensive transfers coming into the back seven with Gabe Powers in the linebacking unit, Gunnar Maldonado, Amarian Fortenberry to pair with a ton of really talented names that return all across the board for this Kansas State defense. It does hinge on Avery Johnson, though. He takes that next step. Kansas State will as well. I think it's what happens, and Kansas State beats TCU to hand the Horned Frogs their second loss of the season. However, I do think that TCU bounces back nicely. I do have them winning this one against Baylor. These are two teams, quite simply, that I like a ton in Big 12 play. However, I do think TCU, with this one being at home, will get the advantage of the Baylor Bears. Baylor's got two really good running backs. They got a really good wide receiver room. Even if Ashton Hawkins doesn't get his eligibility restored, I think the wide receiver room is still going to be pretty well off, and a really good quarterback to boot in Sawyer Robertson. Defensively, ton of really impressive transfers enter in to pair with a ton of experience in that front seven. They can give this TCU offensive line fits, but again, I just don't think this secondary, even with all it returns, probably going to be one of the better challenges that TCU has seen, maybe besides, of course, Arizona State. Kansas State secondary was liable last year, so TCU can give them some problems. Baylor might be one of the better secondaries that TCU's played up to this point, but I'll go with the one at home. I think TCU's defense also forces the turnover needed, and they're going to be able to get that win against the Bears at home. Welcome to the Big 12. Road games are really, really tough to win. Sorry, I don't know why it skipped. You probably spoiled the other prediction there, so I'll run through the West Virginia game really quickly. Why do I think they are going to lose to the West Virginia Mountaineers? Well, quite simply, this is a West Virginia team that still does have a lot of really good talent on it. However, they are breaking in a new yet familiar head coach. I know, really confusing, but Rich Rodriguez is coming back there to coach that team. Nico Marchiol is breaking in the quarterback room. Jaheim White is a really good running back that returns for him this season. Still got some solid wide receiver pieces. Defensively, I think you're going to need to try to build that section up a little bit. It's a program not left in a bad spot after Neil Brown at all, but this is a West Virginia team. Give Rich Rod some time, and I think you'll start to see the wins that we saw in his last stint at West Virginia start to pile up. This is a game, though, that I really like West Virginia to win, and I think I'm going to go with it. And then here's going to be the big win. Well, you could argue the SMU win is the big one, but here's another big win for TCU this season. Look, I like what Iowa State has done this year, but you're losing some really important pieces in that defensive backfield. Bo Frailer is a really, really big one. And again, I think teams are really going to have a tough time slowing down this TCU pass game this season. BYU could very well be one of those teams as well. And again, BYU is a team that's really tricky to figure out right now because BYU's got the situation with Jake Retzlaff, and given the allegations that are going on against him, you have to take those accusations up a level considering the university that we are dealing with here. I think BYU is a really, really talented team that, especially with Jake Retzlaff, can do what they couldn't do last year, get into a Big 12 championship after being probably the best team in the conference for most of the 2024 season. They can do it here in 2025. They got a lot of explosive playmakers. It's just the uncertainty around Retzlaff, why that team is so hard to predict. And then TCU, again, here's a welcome to the Big 12 moment. Houston could very well take that next step with Willie Fritz this season. I think they got a lot of good talent and weapons, and the only other way I can explain this one is welcome to the chaos chaos of the Big 12 Conference. TCU will win the final game against Cincinnati, and that moves them to 8-4 on the season. Again, guys, I think if this is the TCU defense that can take a step forward and make the right moves, I think road games are going to be really challenging for TCU this season because I could see turnovers offensively being a problem for this unit. However, this team improves defensively. I think you pull out a couple of these road games and all of a sudden you put yourself right in the mix of a Big 12 championship contention. So with all that said and done, 8-4, let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Remember to play hard but tailgate harder, and we'll see all you guys tomorrow with some more predictions. Goodbye.